welcome to hour number 2 on a Monday with hashtag Daily K's host, Peter B. Tired of just scratching the surface of Korea? Want to get deep in the weeds?
We unpack everything about Korea through its history on
Now and Then
with David.
It's a Monday morning, it is Valentine's Day, and there's no weekday guest I'd rather have in the studio than David Tizard on this lovely romantic day. How are we doing? Why are you getting further away? The chair wheels must be broken.
Yeah, I'm comfortable with that, Pete. That's totally good.
Lovely stuff. Have you had a good week since we saw you last?
Yeah, absolutely. It's getting a bit warmer. The Ipchun, the start of spring, has definitely come upon us.
It feels that way, doesn't it?
So, things are going good, apart from the COVID outside, but we'll leave that. But other than that, the world is a bright, happy place for me.
Yeah, I do like the temperatures warming up. It makes me realise soon we're going to be able to play freely outside, maybe take the kids to some outdoor venues as well, without worrying too much about wrapping up super warm. A lot of our listeners are preoccupied today, David, with the Super Bowl. Apparently it's going on right now.
It's like a dish or something?
It's got all these fancy little gadgets and gizmos. Apparently it's an American football game, but when I've watched a bit of it, it seems to be an entertainment show. Are you into that at all?
I find it too stop-start for my own personal taste. I grew up playing a lot of rugby.
Yep.
And that's a full-on octane game. It never stops. And so I can understand the fascination with American football, the strategic chess-like arrangements, but personally it's never been for me. I do know some people who are big fans of forgive me if I get it wrong, the Bengal Tigers.
Ah, they're playing today.
And they're the perennial underachievers. They've never really done anything from what I understand.
Okay.
And so they've reached this grand stage, and, if they do it, there's a lot of people I know going to be happy.
That'd be fantastic. Much like Liverpool in their few decades of drought until recently. I just wanted to get a dig in there because Liverpool are way better than Arsenal. Today's topic, a really interesting one. I think many of our listeners are big fans of what we're going to be talking about today because they're big fans of historical dramas and movies. We're talking about the nation's attire.
We are. We're going to talk today we're going to get into sort of K-pop and some K-pop groups and how this all plays out, but we are going to talk today first about the Hanbok.
Okay.
And the Hanbok being the traditional item of Korean attire that's been worn through the years. And there's a reason that we're talking about it, because at the moment, the Beijing Winter Olympics are taking place. There's a lot of great sporting achievements. South Korea winning some medals. The curling's very exciting. Short track.
They beat Great Britain and Russia, I think, along the way.
We're hearing the Youngmi coming back from the curling. And the reason the Hanbok has come into the news again was because at the opening ceremony of the Beijing Winter Olympics, there was a part where they featured the various ethnic minorities of China. Yeah. And in there is about 50 different ethnic minorities, one of which would be the Joseonjok, which we'll get into. And there was a young woman wearing a hanbok. And so this caused a lot of Korean people to see that and see it as an act of cultural appropriation, or an act of stealing Korea's culture and trying to represent it as China's cultural heritage. And so it really did erupt online, and the whole internet this week has been filled with not just stories about the Hanbok, but about Korea-China relations more generally. Politicians have been leveraging this story for their own political gain. And many South Korean citizens have been rightly quite upset, I think, by this story.
Yeah, and like the judging at certain events at the Winter Olympics, I don't think they were Chinese referees. I think, in fact, the speed skating judge that got in the most controversy was from Great Britain, if I'm not mistaken. We'll just keep that under wraps. Well, we need to know what Joseonjok is to kind of figure out and take apart this story and how it's been portrayed, I suppose.
Yes, this is very interesting. So for those that have listened to this show a little bit, they'll understand about the tragic colonization of Korea from 1910 until 1945. During the period of colonization, many Koreans tried to escape from Japanese colonial rule. They wanted to get out, and so some of them went to Japan, and we might call those people Zainichi Koreans.
Okay.
Some of them went north up into China, where they might get involved with the Chinese Communist Party, the Chinese Nationalists, or the Soviet Union. The Koreans that settled in China, in that part of the world, they're called Joseonjok, and there's about 2 million ethnic Koreans there, and they're a recognized minority group, and 2 million is quite a broad it's a large amount of people there.
Yeah, if you think about the population of Korea, South Korea, that would make up a big portion if they were to all return.
Absolutely, and they have their own culture, their own identity, and so the Beijing Olympics was trying to represent that part of it. And there's this big, deep historical antagonism between Korea and China. And it's been playing out more recently, I think, online. So I'm not sure if I told you this, but I posted online about Happy Solal. And I posted a picture of some rice cake soup.
Yeah.
I got lots of tweets back from Chinese people saying Happy Chinese New Year.
Oh,
they took umbrage with me saying Happy Lunar New Year. So
goodness gracious.
Online is a really big environment. So when people saw that Hanbok in the Beijing opening ceremony, they saw it as an extension of this culture war between the two countries, I think, rather than a representation of an ethnic minority in China, which is the Joseonjok.
Sure, yeah. I mean, I wonder how those people feel about it being represented at the Beijing Games. I think that would be important as well, the Joseonjok. I think they might be proud, I might say.
Absolutely, because we want to represent, and we don't really want to advocate sort of ethno-nationalism, and we do want to give respect and representation to this people. There is probably a political motivation in Beijing representing those 50 minorities, because they've faced a lot of criticism for their treatment of the Uyghurs and people of a Muslim heritage in China. So I think that was their attempt to show multiculturalism. And while some people looked upon it positively, perhaps in Korea it's backfired a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting thing, you talking about the Lunar New Year. I didn't think anyone would take offense to that. That's a very kind of neutral term, just saying that it's based on the moon. But when I was growing up, I must admit, I only knew it as Chinese New Year in the UK growing up. And
so just to go back to that, Pete, I didn't personally take offense. When I saw all these tweets coming in to my reply section, I personally didn't take offense, but I can imagine that if I were Korean and I were seeing those coming onto my posts, I might feel a little bit more upset. So I can empathize a little bit with the way that this is playing out on social media.
Sure, interesting stuff. Well, lots of people getting in touch, and Tropical K saying, Lordy, this whole China-Korea thing is really getting crazy now. And David, your Korean Times article this weekend, When is Anti-Chinese Sentiment Racism, was a great read. And maybe not something that you can find that easily in Korean media. It is a very interesting subject to look at. And obviously, we've not grown up here, so we've got different points of view and stuff.
Right.
It's something interesting to take a deeper dive in, I feel.
There is a broader systemic thing going on there to be looked at. I agree. And thank you for the compliments for my article. It takes sometimes a lot of courage to write those things, but I do my best. Hartley Saunders II. Does sound like a golf player. Oh, this is related to Friday's discussion about Korean Chinese food, and the Chinese food in Korea is very, very popular. It's so different from the Chinese food that we would have back in the United Kingdom, for example. But yeah, there is this deep dialectical connection between. And then Sherry Russell says, I didn't know there was all this umbrage going on over the issue. People are taking umbrage and the qualm levels are high, Sherry Russell. Yes, it's very serious here.
Yeah, we talked about it being an issue, I think about 6 months to a year ago, when there are some articles coming out from China, some influencers wearing the hanbok or something that looked very similar to a hanbok and kind of claiming ownership. And then there's been the kimchi scandal as well, which really hit a nerve with many Koreans.
The Song Jia one has played into it as well, and the politicians. Yeah, it's a very big, deep story.
Let's get on to hanboks. Yeah. This is something that can't be disputed, how lovely they are. Stacey saying they're beautiful. Benedict saying, I love them. I've never had one yet. You do need a hanbok in your closet, just in case, I feel. Yeah, I've got 2, I think.
I nearly wore one today for this topic, but just the practicality. Do you know what I mean? I did nearly wear one. The the hanbok over time has changed. And so we'll just bring up a little image just to give the viewers and listeners an idea how it's changed from the Goguryeo to the Goryeo to the early Joseon and to the late Joseon.
Wow,
dynasty.
It really is different, isn't it?
It is. And so most of the hanbok that we know today is based on this kind of mid to late Joseon dynasty. So from around the, let's say, 1500s onwards, that's kind of it. However, it's always composed of those two parts, the top and the bottom.
Yeah.
And it's how they go together. You'll notice that the length and the widths of these have definitely changed over time.
Yeah, it does look like, for anyone who can't see the image just listening, in the Goguryeo dynasty, the top, I don't know how long it goes. I can't see the end of it. But in the late Joseon dynasty, the top, the Chogori, I think that's called, is way shorter, like almost to your chest level kind of thing. And
absolutely.
That's it.
Yeah. It's getting the top is getting much shorter over time, and the skirt is getting a little bit more narrow, less wide, I think. That's what's taking place there. In terms of the regional and cultural transmission, obviously history can be very difficult, but I think it's important to get this idea that with Korea, with China, with Japan, the cultural transmission as music, as food, as literature, as clothes, as all of these things during 1,000 years, 2,000 years, it was never a one-way street.
Sure.
So it was never just cars. If you imagine a road with just cars going one way, it was never that. It was always two-way, and it was always dialectic.
Yeah, I would assume many countries and their neighbours, it would be that way, right?
No, absolutely it is. And so to say that one thing is 100% only, let's say, Japanese or Korean or Chinese, it's very hard sometimes to pick them apart. Of course, there are specific characteristics, but I think that you will see similarities between these types of dresses and the clothes. One thing that I will point out is the mangon. And the mangon is like a Korean piece of headwear. And this one that they've said is, this one was from the Joseon dynasty. And this did sort of go and influence the people of Ming dynasty in China.
Oh, wow.
So the culture was going some ways. They were getting ideas from each other during this.
Yeah, and you would have seen a lot of these things in historical dramas and movies if you've seen them from Korea. And we did talk about some controversies in one historical drama which was cancelled, right, due to the Chinese kind of
Joseon
influences.
Gumasa, the Exorcist, wasn't it?
Yeah, and so we can see how we are sensitive to that. In terms of the hanbok, though, like you said, it is changing. It has changed a lot, right?
It is, and just very briefly, you might look at the change in the hanbok for the women. So when you watch K-dramas, we've touched on this a little bit before briefly, but when you watch K-dramas, those hanboks and the women might not always represent the historical accuracy.
Of course,
but for women, there has been a greater liberalization and modernization for the hanbok. And so for the female hanbok, things such as the tangot and the suge-chima, these were previously sort of head coverings that they would wear.
Oh, wow.
And this is kind of a very beautiful depiction of it, but it would be to hide the woman from public view. And this was quite common. As we get up to more modern South Korea, that kind of head covering goes away. And of course, in a K-drama, if you have a beautiful actor, celebrity, you don't want them with a head covering. So that kind of does get left out a little bit of the history of the hanbok in the drama manifestations.
Yeah, I remember on one of your first shows with us, David, you were saying how, you know, in reality, a lot of females were hidden almost from society. They'd be in the house rather than out and about too much.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely. That was the way it was at the time, and it's changed. And it has really changed these days.
Yeah, so looking into Hallyu, which is the buzzword of the minute, has been the buzzword for more than a decade, been like on and off, but really on at the moment with BTS and whatnot. Hanbok has kind of gone hand in hand to a certain extent.
It has, because if you look at elements of Hallyu, K-pop videos, these are watched and enjoyed by people from all over the world. And different people have different ideas of cultural sensitivity. So some people might suggest in K-pop videos that to use, let's say, braids or to use certain hairstyles, to use certain concepts is a form of cultural appropriation. So we have to be careful of that. But also on the other hand, when these K-pop artists, when they represent Korea through the use of Hanbok and through the use of these traditional cultures, then the fans start to get excited. They say, well, look at that. And it becomes a bridge to learn, I think, more about Korean culture and Korean history through just the pop music itself.
I think it is totally win-win if you're using Korea's cultural content as a K-pop artist, right?
I'm trying to talk to you at the moment, Pete, but I can see a picture of Blackpink on the screen here. And it's distracting me completely.
Because we are connoisseurs of the modern style of Hanbok, I feel, David. These are like not the traditional sense, because we're seeing mini skirts and hot pants infused with the kind of Hanbok patterns and whatnot.
I must confess here's a gobek for you. I must confess that if I were to see that, I wouldn't immediately think that was a Hanbok.
No, just at a glance earlier, I was like, why have we got that picture? And then I look closely and you can see some of the tops are in the style of that chogori, where you're kind of pulling over one side above the other. You've got kind of that collar region as well. And they look stunning. They
do. And when they did their new song at the time, How You Like That, on the Jimmy Fallon show, that was what they were wearing. And it sort of really caught the eyes of people, because you can see, just when I talked about representing culture, they were digging into Korean heritage. They were creating that fusion between history and, that modern, chic, attractive look. But it was steeped in Korean culture rather than any other cultures from around the world.
Yeah, and I guess it kind of maybe makes more sense, because I feel like if this was maybe 10, 15 years ago, when it wasn't as global, K-pop, that Korean audiences might think, why are you wearing Hanboks in your videos for us, But if you're doing it to the outside and promoting it, I think Korean fans are then really excited, like, well done for doing that.
K-pop is often for Korean people, because in Korea it's not K-pop, it's just pop.
Yes.
It's different. So I think you're right that the audience does matter.
Yeah, and I do recall as well BTS getting a lot of love for their Hanboks, right?
And you can see the media attention, that the articles and the YouTube videos that get made when BTS do something like this. Perhaps one of the more famous was the 2018 MMA Awards. You get Jimin doing all the dances on stage. You get the traditional Korean culture associated with it. And this creates so much global attention, and it puts the focus on Korea's clothes, Korea's culture in a very positive way, I think. And when you have BTS as a conduit for that, wow.
Yeah, it's much more interesting to watch BTS and Blackpink on stage than listen to just me and you dryly talk about it, which we're not doing, because we've got the help of these great things and your great insight as well. But that just helps fans approach it, right, much more naturally and easily.
It does. And the next one is a funny one. Jin even wearing one to the airport on his way to Hong Kong. Airport fashion is quite a thing in K-pop. I'm not sure if you're aware of this.
Yeah, but isn't it like designer clothes and maybe some comfortable tracksuit pants that look really stylish? I didn't know. He looks like he's in a historical drama in this one.
Yeah, he's in the airport.
Wow, he did the full on, like, the cut hat and everything?
That's as I understand it. That's arriving at Incheon Airport. He's going to the their Asian Music Awards.
That's
in
amazing.
Hong Kong, and he's flexing the tradition. He's like, here we go.
Knowing that he will be photoed, because airport fashion, like you said, is such a big deal.
It is a thing,
I'm
right?
sure that played heavily into it. I wonder what the check-in staff and cabin crew and things like that thought as well. I guess it's wonderful. If you want to dress like that, go for it.
Download the Arirang radio app on your device for free.
It's Arirang. ARIRANG Radio.
Lots of you commenting on this. Frankie's on board saying, what are you talking about? Well, so far it's Hanbok and Hallyu was in our last section. So if you've got any examples of you seeing that and having liked it, please do let us know. Ing saying from Malaysia, I'm hearing about the whole Hanbok controversy for the first time. As someone from neither country, I wouldn't think it was anything wrong. I knew about the Joseonjok years ago through food and culture programs, and I know that they're a minority in China. And I do use, personally, Lunar New Year when wishing Korean friends to avoid offending anyone a Happy New Year. And we don't wish anyone Chinese New Year in the Chinese language. We call it Lunar 2. But it might be necessary to call it Chinese New Year in Malaysia to avoid confusion, as we have multiracial nations having many different New Years. That's interesting. Yeah, I guess in the Chinese language, you wouldn't say Happy Chinese New Year, would you?
No.
It'd be just a given.
Right. Going on that, this idea of the Joseonjok and the diaspora over there, Silver Granny and her grumpy gnome, great name, says that she's surprised the hanbok of that minority group, the Joseonjok, in China hasn't changed a bit from the traditional Korean hanbok, and why didn't the Joseonjok return to Korea from China? Really good questions, Silver Granny. And I would say for the first one, with the hanbok have not changing, it was very much a modern representation of a hanbok. It wasn't necessarily a traditional one. It was a hanbok akin to what you might see, and we might touch on it in a minute, for example, in downtown Seoul at one of the palaces. And so that also did raise some discussion. And why didn't the Joseonjok return to Korea from China? I think they found a home. They found a place to live. And that is the way of people, actually. People do migrate and they do find homes. And so some do return, but then sometimes they do face discrimination inside South Korea. And so it's all looking at that aspect of it.
Yeah, there is a significant population of Joseonjok in certain parts and pockets of Seoul and other parts of the country, and sometimes they do face difficulties as well. And I think, everyone's different. Some people might have chosen to stay, and some people found it difficult to return, etc., etc. We've got something from Hartley saying, I would love to wear those male hanbok styles with those wide brim black mesh hats, the cats. Do it, Hartley. Why not? The cat got so much fame after Kingdom,
That's
right?
right, yeah.
And so you can find it quite easily on many of the online stores all across the world,
You
right?
can. Stacey says they look beautiful in their male hanbok outfits, but what about the bride ones? Stacey, stay tuned. You might hear one. And Sherry Russell saying she's learning more things from today's episode and didn't know about the Korean diaspora in China. Yeah, absolutely. There's it's really interesting to learn about and to pay attention and try to increase our understanding of these things.
Yeah, it must be one of the biggest populations of Koreans outside Korea, right, in terms of their heritage. And this from Siska saying, just because you're talking about hanbok, happy Valentine's Day to you guys. I love watching the Sagat dramas because of these pretty ones. And this is you wearing it outside, I believe, one of the palace walls with a couple of other listeners.
Wow, that's fantastic.
It looks beautiful and kind of looks like the one that I recall seeing at the Beijing Olympics opening ceremony. A little similar to that. So we've done BTS even at the airport with their hanboks. Where next?
Well, just because we saw that wonderful photo from Siska, let's have a look at that idea of hanboks at the palace. So if you come to South Korea, and there are palaces all over downtown Seoul, you pay to get in and to walk around the palaces. However, you can then rent a hanbok and then your entrance will be free. And this is a really interesting idea because I will lecture with international students when they come to Korea, and they'll be very vocal about the ideas of cultural appropriation, as we discussed in K-pop videos. And then at the weekend, I asked them, well, what did you do during the weekend? They'll say, I went to Gyeongbokgung and I wore a hanbok and I posted it on my social media.
I did it personally.
Yeah, exactly. So the point I'm trying to make, not to make light of it, is that in Korea, when you visit these sites and landmarks, you're encouraged almost. They want people to represent Korean culture. So sometimes it's not the act itself, but it's who's doing it and the reason. So in Korea, wearing a hanbok is really encouraged, and so many people do it if you go to those palaces.
Yes, you see, especially the younger generation taking photos for their social media. And like you said, I think Koreans as well love it when they see foreigners wearing it in places like Gyeongbokgung and stuff. They'll be bigging it up.
Absolutely, and it's not just the palace. You'll see when you look on the screen, for those that are looking at it, it's so common, and it really adds to the occasion, I think, because it's not just people walking around in jeans, but you almost feel like you're in a K-drama if you do this. You get this idea that you're royalty of some sort.
And it looks way better for your Instagram feed, I must say that. I'd love to wear a bearskin at Buckingham Palace, like wear the uniform.
Wouldn't it?
If I got free entry as well. Onwards and upwards.
Onwards and upwards. Well, one of the times, because like you say, Pete, you have this wonderful hanbok with the tiger on the back. I don't necessarily wear a hanbok in my day-to-day life, but one of the times where hanboks are often still worn is during parts of a Korean wedding ceremony. So while in recent life you have the the interesting thing I noticed about a Korean wedding is that the bride will often go through about 4 or 5 changes of clothes during
Yes,
it.
it's quite impressive.
It is, isn't it? So in the West, I understood that it was one wedding dress.
Yeah.
And that's the dress that you wore. In South Korea, there'll be a main wedding dress. There might then be a cocktail or an evening dress. And then for those that do the pebek ceremony, then there will be people wearing the hanbok as well.
Is this you, David?
Yeah, that's me.
Goodness gracious. Yeah, you often find them wearing these kind of royal-looking ones, as you're doing here, and I love it. You've got the same Western token friends sitting looking a bit mystified in the background.
That's my younger brother. That's Adam, and he's getting married in September. And so I thought this was an interesting to show him there. He's on a diet at the moment to get ready for the wedding.
Congratulations.
There's a reason, though, why people wear that is because for that one day when people got married, they were allowed to wear the clothes of the Joseon court.
Oh.
So you could become
Was that a royal part of the protocol?
Part of the protocol, so official. So it was only a low-ranking one, but for that one day, you got to feel special and to wear those clothes. So I think that's quite a nice aspect of it. You know, you get to feel special on your special day.
Yeah, I absolutely did that at my wedding. It's not just foreigners that do it, but also Koreans, because sometimes you will see foreigners wearing them more for touristy reasons or whatever.
Yeah.
But at weddings, I've seen most of my friends at the pebek, that kind of post, I guess, more standard wedding ceremony, the traditional one where you're throwing the jujubes and the chestnuts to see how many kids you're going to have.
Yes.
You are wearing the hanbok.
Absolutely.
I do love that touch. In terms of this next topic, we've talked about it a couple of times on the show, that there are some schools that are going to be taking on hanbok uniforms, and I think they started it a few years ago, but a very modern version, right?
A very modern version, and yeah, so the ones that you see in the dramas, this is an adaptation, and it's pushed really by the culture department of the South Korean government. They're trying to get hanbok into the day-to-day lives, and this comes through with a lot of sponsorship and funding.
Yeah.
Whether it's successful, whether it pays off, whether the young South Korean kids really want to be wearing modern hanboks is a different question.
Sure.
However, there is this movement to sort of update it and make it part of Korean life. So Korea can provide continuity from its history to its modern life. Because if you look at Korean history and you look at modern Korea, sometimes there seems to be a lot of disjointedness.
Sure.
And so I think these are very interesting efforts to just to bring those two things together a bit more.
Yeah, I don't know if anyone asked today, but, you know, in regular daily life, you're not wearing a traditional hanbok. You know, even on the holidays, many people don't wear them at all, and even some kids won't wear them because they're just like, I don't want to do it again, mummy or daddy. That is a personal experience I had for this solo.
Yeah, absolutely. That's
maybe in the
goes.
future through school uniforms. I'd love it if my son wore it, to be honest, but they don't wear any school uniforms at elementary school here for the most part, right?
No.
It's more from like middle school. David, as ever, thank you for this really interesting topic. We'll see you again next Monday.
Thank you very much. Have a good day, everybody.
You can listen to Monday's segment Now and Then with David Tizard every Monday from 10 a.m. KST on #DailyK.